She was just 5, cheeks hollowed by cold, her little fingers curled tight around a torn teddy bear, lying half asleep at the edge of a snowy bus stop in Minneapolis. No hat, no gloves, a red dress barely reaching her knees. Her whisper? "Daddy left because of me." But it wasn't the snow that would end her story, and it wasn't fate that brought him back. It was Max, his old war dog, who stopped walking toward the river, turned around, and refused to let him go. What they found that morning would change everything. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. Let's see how far her whisper can travel. Minneapolis, late January. A morning where the air was less a breath and more a blade, slicing through coats and bone alike. Snow flurried sideways in bursts, blanketing the world in quiet white. The Mississippi River, half frozen and angry beneath its skin of ice, groaned under the pressure of the season. On its bank, where few dared to walk at this hour, a man and his dog stood still. Logan Hart, 45, war-worn and solitude-bound, stared out across the water with hollow eyes. His once squared shoulders, hardened from military discipline, had softened under the weight of grief. Thick stubble shadowed a chiseled jawline now set in permanent tension. Beneath his dark wool coat, his hands trembled slightly. Whether from cold or memory, even he couldn't tell anymore. Combat boots crunched the snow, but made no impression on the numbness within. Beside him sat Max, a 5-year-old German shepherd, black and sable, with one scar running down his right foreleg like a lightning bolt. Max had once been a military K-9, a search and rescue companion trained for war, explosives, and sensing what humans couldn't. He was Logan's partner long before he became his only reason to keep breathing. The river called, not with noise but with silence, a promise of sleep, of relief, of surrender. Logan unclipped Max's leash and took a slow, uncertain step toward the icy edge. "Stay," he whispered. But Max didn't stay. The dog's ears perked, his nose lifted. He sniffed, growled low, and pivoted sharply eastward. Then, without warning, he bolted toward the tree-lined trail adjacent to the river path, his paws slicing through untouched snow. "Max!" Logan called out, his voice hoarse and half-hearted, but instinct kicked in. He followed. They wound through skeletal trees until Max came to a sudden halt near an old, weather-beaten bus stop shelter on the fringe of an empty lot. It was barely more than a steel bench under a cracked plastic canopy, nearly invisible beneath icicles and drifting snow. But what lay there stopped Logan in his tracks. A small figure, curled like a comma against the metal bench, knees to chest. A little girl, no more than 5. Her dress, once red, was torn and stained, now frozen at the edges. Her arms wrapped around a stuffed bear missing one eye. Her feet were bare, her skin pale with blotches of blue, and her cheeks flushed with the kind of cold that meant time was running out. Max whined, crept forward, then sat beside her, tail wagging slowly as if urging Logan closer. Logan's breath caught. A soldier's heart, trained for battlefields and loss, now seized at the sight of a child abandoned to winter. He dropped to one knee, pulled off his coat, and draped it over her tiny form. She stirred, barely. "Hey, hey," he said, gently cupping her face. "You're okay now. Can you hear me?" Her lips parted, no words, only a rasp of breath, then a whisper, softer than wind. "I wasn't supposed to be born?" The words stabbed deeper than any bullet. "What's your name?" Logan asked, throat tight. She blinked. "Emily." He blinked too. The name hit like a brick, but he said nothing. His gaze locked onto her eyes, stormy gray, streaked with amber. Eyes he had only seen once before. Claire. Logan swallowed, hard. Claire had been gone for 5 years. She left when he returned from deployment, fractured, screaming in his sleep, afraid to hold anything delicate for fear of crushing it. They hadn't spoken since, and she had been 6 months pregnant. But this couldn't be. Logan shook off the thought. It didn't matter right now. What mattered was getting the girl warm and safe. He picked Emily up slowly, bracing her head against his chest. Her body was light. Too light. Malnourished. She clutched the stuffed bear with what little strength she had. Max trotted beside them, eyes vigilant. The truck wasn't far, an old navy blue pickup with cracked leather seats and a faded flag sticker on the bumper. Logan gently settled Emily into the back, wrapped in a thick blanket he kept there for emergencies. He cranked the heat up until the vents hissed and whirred. Then he climbed into the driver's seat, heart pounding against ribs that felt suddenly too tight. His cabin sat 20 minutes north, hidden in the woods on a rented plot of land. After the divorce, he couldn't stand cities. He wanted nothing more than silence and trees, and no one to witness his slow erosion. But today, he had to break that isolation. As he drove, the wind howled against the windshield, wipers pushing slush aside. In the rearview mirror, he watched Emily's eyes flutter. She was still with him. Max sat alert on the passenger side, occasionally glancing back. "You saved her," Logan said softly. "You always know, don't you?" Max gave a small grunt as if to confirm. The road narrowed as they approached the cabin. Snow had piled high along the edges, and the tires skidded once, but Logan was used to it. He parked beside the porch, jumped out, and carefully lifted Emily again. The cabin was small but warm. Wooden walls, one main room with a fireplace, a modest kitchen, and a back bedroom. Logan laid Emily on the couch near the fire, covered her in more blankets, and checked her hands and feet. No frostbite yet. Thank God. He set a kettle on the stove, poured water into a mug, and dissolved powdered cocoa. It wasn't much, but it was warm. He coaxed a few sips into her lips once she stirred again. Her voice cracked. "Where's Mama?" Logan froze. "She's not here," he said gently. Tears welled in her eyes. Her hands clutched the bear tighter. Did I do something wrong?" "No," Logan said quickly, kneeling beside her. "You didn't do anything wrong. I promise you that." She nodded, but didn't look convinced. She fell asleep soon after, curled beneath 2 wool blankets and a quilt Max dragged over himself earlier in the winter. Max now lay directly in front of the couch, head on his paws, eyes watching her steadily. Logan stood there, heart fractured in too many places to count. He didn't know who Emily was, not yet, but some part of him felt it in his marrow. That this wasn't coincidence, that maybe, just maybe, life hadn't given up on him yet. The wind howled around the corners of Logan's small rented cabin, like a ghost remembering how to weep. It was built decades ago with no intention of comfort, just functionality, a temporary shelter for ice fishermen in winter or hikers during the thaw. But tonight, with snow blanketing the steps and cold seeping through the seams, it held 2 souls, one broken by war, the other by something he hadn't yet dared to name. Logan knelt by the fireplace, stacking logs with shaking hands. His fingers still trembled, not from the cold, but from what he'd seen earlier. The little girl, barely more than a whisper wrapped in red fabric and silence. She hadn't spoken much on the way back. She just held the teddy bear tighter, her small hand gripping his coat sleeve like a lifeline. Max lay beside her now, his large body curled protectively near the couch where Logan had laid her down. The old German shepherd was unusually still, but his amber eyes followed Emily's every twitch. Logan had draped his own army-issued blanket over her thin frame. She'd stopped shivering an hour ago, but her cheeks were still pale, her lips chapped from exposure. He leaned close, his voice rough from disuse. "You need to eat, sweetheart. Just a little soup, okay?" Emily didn't look at him at first, but when she did, the flash of Claire's eyes hit him so hard, he sat back as though struck. Same hue, gray-blue like lake water in winter. But it wasn't just the color. It was the quiet inside them. The kind of quiet that had seen too much. He warmed a can of chicken noodle over the stovetop. No microwave here, no TV, no distractions. Just time and tension, like an old wound aching before a storm. He helped her sip the broth, spoon by spoon, until her eyes started to droop. Then, quietly, he reached for the phone. The local police dispatcher didn't question him much, just took down the situation, promised to log the call, and said an officer might be delayed due to the blizzard cutting off parts of the highway. When he asked for social services, she transferred him to Grace Holloway. Grace's voice came through the static with calm professionalism, but warmth too. "Mr. Cole, I understand there's a child with you, and she was alone?" "Yes," Logan said. "I found her at a bus stop on Southfield Road. She was freezing, no shoes. Says her name is Emily." There was a pause. Then, "Do you have any reason to believe she's in immediate danger?" She said her mom cries all the time, and someone named Rick. "He hates me." Those were her words. Logan's voice cracked despite himself. She didn't say much else. Another pause. Then Grace replied, Mr. Cole, the highways are currently unplowed and we're understaffed. I won't be able to reach you until morning. Until then, I need you to keep her safe. Give her warmth, food, let her sleep. I'll get there first thing. Understood. Before hanging up, Grace added, And Mr. Cole, thank you for doing the right thing. He didn't reply. He didn't know what the right thing even was anymore. When he returned to the couch, Emily was asleep again. Her face was blotchy, her fists clenched around the teddy bear's worn ear. She stirred when Max shifted, then whispered something almost inaudible. Logan leaned in. She cries at night, Emily mumbled. Mom, she cries when she thinks I don't hear, but I hear. And Rick yells. He says I ruin everything. Logan's throat closed. Do you know where you live, Emily? He asked gently. She nodded slowly. The White House, with the peeling porch. There's a mailbox shaped like a duck. Then her eyelids fell again. He sat down beside Max, who lifted his scarred snout and rested it against Logan's knee. Max had been his partner overseas, a bomb-sniffing K-9 who'd saved lives, including Logan's. The explosion that had taken the lower half of his best friend's leg had left Max wounded too. Both of them were patched together in ways no one could see. It was Max who'd stopped him at the river, Max who'd refused to let him die alone. Logan stroked the dog's back. Who is she, Max? God, could she be... He didn't finish the sentence. The last time he'd seen Claire was 5 years ago. They'd fought, loud, bitter. He couldn't connect anymore. The war had taken things from him that he didn't know how to give back. He lashed out, closed off. Claire had cried in the kitchen, her hand over her belly, and said, I can't raise a child in this. The next morning, she was gone. And now this child, 5 years old, same eyes. At dawn, Logan heard the crunch of tires over packed snow. A dark green SUV marked County Services pulled up beside the fence. Grace Holloway stepped out, a tall woman in her early 40s with red hair swept back in a bun, square glasses, and a long beige trench coat pulled tight against the wind. She looked tired but sharp. She knocked on the door with 3 brisk raps. Logan opened it and stepped aside. Grace walked in, scanning everything. Her gaze landed on Emily still curled on the couch with Max beside her. She looks stable, Grace said. Thank you for what you did. Logan nodded. She needs help. And maybe protection. Grace approached Emily gently, knelt beside her, and said in a soft voice, Hi, Emily. I'm Grace. I'm here to help get you home. Emily stirred, sat up slowly, and blinked at her. She looked toward Logan, then Max, then back to Grace. Do I have to go back? She whispered. Grace hesitated. For now, yes. But we're going to make sure everything is safe, okay? Logan followed her outside after packing up Emily's things. A plastic bag holding the teddy bear, a coloring book Logan had given her, and his old scarf wrapped around her neck. As the door of the SUV closed, Emily looked out the window. She didn't wave. She just looked. And Logan, he stood in the snow until the taillights vanished. The wind had softened in Minneapolis, but the snow remained like a memory that wouldn't melt. A few days had passed since Emily had been taken from Logan's arms, and yet the weight of her absence lingered in his chest like an old wound flaring in the cold. He hadn't slept well. Max, too, paced the floor restlessly each night, as if waiting for something that never came. Grace had kept in touch. The case wasn't closed. Not yet. She'd filed her initial report, flagged the situation for further observation, and today she called. I'm heading over for a wellness check, she said, her voice steady but low. Thought you might want to come. Logan didn't answer at first. Then he said, Yes, I need to see her, just to make sure she's really okay. They drove in silence through the gray city. The streets were slick with salt, the snowbanks turning the color of soot. Logan wore his old coat again, the one that still smelled faintly of gun oil and pine. Max sat in the back seat of Grace's SUV, alert, ears up, tail low. Logan could feel the dog's tension, as if the thread between them and that little girl hadn't been severed, but merely stretched. Emily's house stood at the corner of a tired neighborhood, where fences leaned like old men and porches sagged under the weight of forgotten repairs. The duck-shaped mailbox she'd mentioned stood crooked at the curb, half buried in snow. Grace knocked. The door opened after a long moment. Claire stood there. She looked like someone who had once been beautiful, but hadn't remembered it in years. Her once glossy light brown hair now hung limply around her thin face, frayed and dull. There were shadows beneath her gray-blue eyes. Haunted, tired shadows. She was wearing a cardigan far too thin for the cold, sleeves stretched from nervous hands. For a moment, she didn't speak. Her lips parted slightly, her breath catching when she saw Logan behind Grace. "Claire," Logan said softly. She swallowed, her voice hoarse. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here for Emily." Claire hesitated, then stepped aside. "She's in her room." The living room was dim, with drawn curtains and a couch that had seen too many fights and too few kind words. Toys were scattered without care. A bowl of uneaten cereal congealed on the coffee table. The heat was on, but the house felt cold. Emily peeked around the hallway corner. Her small frame still wore the same pink sweater from earlier that week, though it now hung looser on her shoulders. She didn't smile. But when she saw Max, her eyes lit up briefly. The German Shepherd padded forward, tail wagging gently, and sat beside her. Before Logan could speak to her, another voice cut through the room. "Who the hell is this?" A man entered from the back hallway. Rick was in his early 40s, medium height but with broad shoulders and the posture of someone who expected to be obeyed. He had a 5 o'clock shadow that looked permanent, not from style, but apathy. His plaid shirt was open over a stained white undershirt, and his tone carried the kind of authority built on fear, not respect. He looked from Logan to Grace with narrowed eyes, then to Emily. "I told you not to come out when people are here," he barked. Emily flinched. Max growled low in his throat. Rick stepped forward, puffed his chest. "Control your damn dog." Logan moved between him and the child, shoulders squared, voice low. "Don't yell at her." Grace stepped in. "We're conducting a welfare check. We received a report of potential concern." "There's no concern," Rick snapped. "We take care of her just fine. Maybe too fine. She's ungrateful half the time." Logan turned back to Emily. She was clutching Max's fur tightly, staring at the floor. "Emily," he said gently, kneeling, "can I see your hands?" She hesitated. "Show him," Claire murmured, almost inaudibly. Emily extended her arm. Her left forearm bore a faint purple bruise, blooming like a secret. Logan didn't speak. He just pulled his phone from his coat pocket and took a photo. Rick stepped forward. "You don't have the right—" "I have the right to protect a child," Logan snapped, "especially when no one else is." Claire looked away, tears brimming. Grace stepped between them. "We'll be submitting this to Child Protective Services. Logan, please step outside with me." They walked out together into the cold air. Claire followed. On the porch, Claire wrapped her arms around herself. "Why are you really here, Logan?" He turned to her slowly. "Because I found a little girl who looked exactly like you. Because she sat in the snow, alone, and nearly froze. And because when I looked into her eyes, I think I saw my daughter." Claire bit her lip, then said quietly, "I don't know what you want from me." "The truth," he replied. "That's all." She blinked back tears. "I left because I was terrified. You were different after the war, angry, closed off. I didn't know how to help you, and I didn't want to raise a child in that silence. I thought I was doing the right thing." "You were 6 months pregnant," he said softly. "I know," her voice cracked. "And when I tried to reach out again, Rick had already taken control. My accounts, my phone, everything. I didn't know how to undo it all." Logan stared at her, the weight of 5 years pressing against his chest. "Why didn't you tell me she was mine?" "I was scared," Claire whispered, "and then ashamed." They stood in silence. Inside, Max was still sitting beside Emily, his head resting lightly against her tiny knee. He looked up when Logan returned, his eyes solemn, as if urging him forward. Logan turned to Grace. "I want to file for emergency guardianship." Grace nodded. "I'll get the paperwork started." The wind had grown sharp again, slicing across the frozen streets of Minneapolis like old regrets come home to roost. Logan stood alone in his small cabin, an old ranger's outpost tucked in the woods just beyond the edge of town. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting shadows along the worn floorboards. Outside, snow whispered against the windows. Inside, silence reigned. Max lay by the door, his ears twitching with every distant howl of wind, his golden-brown coat glinting in the firelight. The scar along his back leg, the one earned from shrapnel in a forgotten war zone, caught a glimmer of orange, a quiet reminder of the loyalty between them. He lifted his head as Logan moved toward the old chest in the corner. The chest groaned as it opened, revealing a collection of remnants from a life long paused. Faded photographs, medals gathering dust, and a small box wrapped in cloth. Logan unwrapped it slowly, revealing a single envelope. The paper had yellowed. His handwriting on the front, bold and uneven, read, "To my daughter, if I ever meet you." He hadn't written it in a moment of hope. He had written it one night in the throes of grief, when Claire had vanished without a trace and the silence she left behind had become unbearable. It had been 5 winters ago. She had left without a note, only a voicemail months later saying she was safe but needed distance. At the time, Logan hadn't known she was carrying their child. He didn't even know if the message had been real. It came from a blocked number. Now, with everything crashing back, Emily's face, her bruises, the way she'd clung to Max, Logan found his fingers trembling as he broke the seal. The letter inside was short, stark, painful. "Dear little one, I don't know your name. I don't know if I'll ever see your eyes, but I want you to know something simple and true. I never left you. I only lost you. And if the day ever comes where we meet, I hope I have the courage to be the father you deserved from the start." "Dad," Logan folded the letter again, this time with care. His throat tightened as he stared into the fire. For a man who had faced down the barrel of death more times than he could count, this helplessness was the most terrifying feeling of all. He reached for his phone and called Grace. "I'm doing it," he said simply. "You're applying for emergency guardianship?" "Yes." On the other end, Grace let out a long breath. "Good. I've already started the report. What Rick's doing may not be enough for a charge yet, but there's more than enough for concern." Logan hesitated. What happens if Claire doesn't agree? "She doesn't have to agree," Grace said gently. "Not if a judge sees reason." After the call, Logan sat in silence, letter resting on his knee, Max now at his side. The dog nudged him softly, as if urging him on. Logan leaned down and whispered, "She's just a kid, Max. And I left her once without knowing. I won't do it again." Meanwhile, across town, the mood inside Claire's house had shifted like the pressure drop before a storm. Claire sat at the edge of the couch, arms wrapped around herself, watching Emily draw on a notepad in the corner. The little girl hummed under her breath. A lullaby Claire used to sing when Emily was still a toddler. It made her heart ache. Rick was in the kitchen, slamming cabinets. His heavy steps echoed like a warning through the thin walls. "You used all the milk again?" he barked. "I didn't," Claire replied, voice low. Rick stalked in. His presence filled the small living room like smoke. His face was red, jaw clenched, stubble dark across his chin. "You think I'm stupid?" Claire stood slowly, trying to place herself between him and Emily. "She's just drawing. Please, not now." He didn't strike her. He never did. Not where anyone could see. But his eyes cut through her with a sharpness that drew invisible blood. He turned away, muttering. Emily watched with wide eyes, clutching her notepad. Later, when Rick left for work, always late, always bitter, Claire locked the door behind him and sank onto the floor beside Emily. The little girl looked up. "Is he mad because of me?" Claire blinked fast. "No, sweetheart, he's just tired." "Mommy?" Emily's voice was barely above a whisper. "Why did Daddy leave?" Claire froze. Emily had never asked before, not directly. She reached out, brushing a lock of hair behind her daughter's ear. "Daddy didn't leave because of you." "Then why?" Claire bit her lip. "Because Mommy was scared." The words burned in her throat because they were true. She had been terrified, not of Logan, not truly, but of the weight he carried after the war. The 1,000-yard stare, the way he sometimes shook in the night. She had begged him to get help, but he shut down instead. When she found out she was pregnant, she couldn't see a future inside those silent walls. And now she had built another prison, this one louder, angrier. She stood and walked to her room, pulling open the drawer where her phone charger used to be. Rick had taken her phone weeks ago after she'd tried to contact an old friend. Her bank accounts? Monitored? Her movements? questioned. She wasn't free, but she was still a mother, and she had to do something. The cafe sat on the corner of Lyndale and 34th, tucked beneath the skeletal branches of a leafless maple. It was the kind of place where time seemed to soften, the windows always fogged with warmth, the smell of cinnamon and dark roast in the air, and old vinyl playing low in the background. Logan arrived early, his breath ghosting in the frosted glass as he peered inside. He hadn't seen Claire in 5 years, at least not as she truly was. The image in his mind was always younger, softer, from a time before war hollowed his eyes and silence built walls between them. He took the corner booth, Max lying quietly beneath the table. The German Shepherd, now 5, was alert but calm, his ears pricking every time the cafe door creaked. Logan sipped his coffee and rubbed the scar on his left knuckle, a wound from a long-gone night in Kandahar that never quite healed, like most things inside him. When Claire entered, the warmth seemed to hesitate before settling again. She looked thinner than he remembered. Her light brown hair was gathered in a loose braid over one shoulder, streaked now with fatigue and something close to sorrow. Her skin, once sun-kissed and lively, now carried a pale, almost translucent weariness. She wore a navy peacoat buttoned tight, as if still bracing against a storm she couldn't see. Her hands fidgeted with the strap of her purse as she spotted him and made her way over. "Logan," she greeted softly, her voice a frayed thread of recognition and unease. He stood and gestured to the seat across from him. "Thanks for coming." Max thumped his tail once, recognizing her scent, and she offered a weak smile in return before settling into the booth. They sat in silence for a moment, the clink of spoons and hiss of milk steamers filling the gap between them. "I didn't know how else to ask," Logan finally said, eyes locked on her. I need to understand. Emily, she was alone, in the snow." Claire flinched as if struck. Her eyes immediately filled, and she looked away, blinking hard. "I know. I saw the bruise on her arm, the way she flinched when that man, Rick, raised his voice. She's terrified. You know that, right?" She nodded, shoulders curling in. "I know." "Then why?" His voice cracked. "Why was she out there? Why didn't you ever tell me she existed?" Claire's lips trembled. She gripped the porcelain cup before her like it was the only anchor she had. "Because I was scared. Of you. Not because I thought you would hurt her. I was scared of what you were becoming." Logan said nothing. "You came back from the war, Logan, but you didn't come home. You slept with the lights on. You kept your distance. You wouldn't talk to me for days at a time. I was 5 months pregnant, and I didn't know how to reach you. I didn't even know how to say goodbye." "You didn't say goodbye," Logan whispered. "You just left." She looked at him then, her eyes filling with the weight of years unsaid. "I thought if I left, maybe you'd get help. Maybe you'd realize how deep you were drowning." He rubbed a hand down his face. "Instead, I just stayed underwater." Claire stared into her untouched coffee. Rick wasn't like that at first. He was charming, kind, said the right things. He helped with Emily when she was little, cooked dinner, got us settled. I thought maybe this could be something stable. But it wasn't, Logan said flatly. She shook her head. "No, it changed slowly. The yelling came first. Then he started controlling my phone. He managed my finances. Told me it was for safety, for the good of Emily. Then came the anger, the broken things. The slaps never landed where anyone could see." Logan's jaw tightened. Max stirred beneath the table, sensing the shift in his pulse. "I wanted to leave," she said. "God knows I tried. But Rick's got friends. He's persuasive. He made me doubt myself. And I thought, maybe I deserved it, for what I did to you. For running." Logan leaned forward. "No one deserves that." Tears welled again, and this time she didn't blink them away. "The night Emily disappeared, I didn't even notice until it was too late. Rick had been yelling for hours. She must have slipped out during the storm. I searched everywhere. But I didn't call the cops because..." She broke off. "Because I was scared they'd find out what our home was really like." "You lost her, Claire," he said, voice firm but not cruel. "She could have died out there." "I know," she said, her hands shaking, "and I hate myself for it." Silence settled like dust. Logan reached into his coat and placed a folded paper on the table. It was the guardianship petition, already signed by Grace, with Logan's information filled in. "I'm not trying to take her from you," he said, "but she's not safe. Not now. Let me keep her somewhere warm. Just for now." Claire stared at the paper. Her hands hovered, unsure. "I'm not the same man," Logan added, voice cracking. "At least, I'm trying not to be." She met his eyes, seeing the damage in them, but also the determination. After a long silence, she picked up the pen from the sugar tray. Her signature came out shaky, but whole. "She deserves better than both of us," Claire whispered. Logan nodded. "Then let's start there." The wind slammed against the windows that evening like fists demanding to be let in. Claire stood in the kitchen of their cramped rental, hands trembling as she wiped down an already clean counter. The paper she had signed with Logan was hidden beneath the false bottom of a drawer, tucked away like so many secrets she'd buried over the years. Rick hadn't spoken much since that morning, but she could feel the tension building like a kettle left on too long. He sat on the torn sofa in the living room, beer in hand, boots muddy and still on. His jaw clenched and unclenched with each passing second, the silence between them stretching into something too sharp to step across. Rick was 48, heavy-set with broad shoulders that once made Claire feel protected, and a bristled beard that aged him further. His gray-streaked dark hair was always combed back, neat and controlled, just like the way he liked his life. He had once worked construction, but now lived mostly off savings, disability claims, and small repair gigs around the neighborhood. Years of hard labor had left his hands calloused and temper short. "Where were you yesterday?" he asked suddenly, voice low but dangerous. Claire froze, the sponge still dripping in her hand. "I took Emily out for hot chocolate," she said, turning slowly. "She's been having nightmares." Rick stood. The beer bottle hit the counter hard enough to chip the edge. "You think I'm stupid?" She didn't answer. He stepped closer. "You were with him, weren't you? Your soldier boy." Claire gripped the edge of the sink, her knuckles white. "I did what I had to, for Emily." Rick's eyes darkened. "You let him near her? After everything?" Claire didn't flinch. "He's her father." The silence was immediate, and then came the storm. He exploded, knocking a lamp from its table, kicking the footstool across the room. Dishes shattered against the floor as he swept his arm across the counter. Emily screamed from the hallway. Claire tried to get to her, but Rick grabbed her arm. "You think you can just take her away from me?" he snarled. "You think I'll just let that happen?" His grip tightened, and Claire cried out. A knock at the door interrupted them. Then another, more urgent. "Police! Open up!" Rick froze. Claire ripped her arm free and stumbled toward the front, throwing it open. Two officers stood on the porch, snow gathering on their shoulders. One of them, Officer Ramirez, was a woman in her late 30s with auburn hair pulled into a tight bun, a sharp jawline, and steady eyes that had seen more than they cared to admit. Beside her was a tall male officer with a square face and thin mustache, hand already on his holstered weapon. "We received a call," Ramirez said calmly, eyes scanning the scene. Rick stepped forward, voice suddenly dripping charm. "Bit of a misunderstanding. Everything's fine." Claire held up her arm, showing the fresh bruise forming beneath the skin. "It's not." The officers exchanged a look. Ramirez stepped inside, gesturing for Claire to gather Emily. "You're coming with us for now." "But he'll just come after us," Claire whispered. "We'll take you somewhere safe," Ramirez assured. "You have somewhere in mind?" Claire nodded. "Grace, she'll know what to do." Within 20 minutes, Grace arrived in a tan SUV dusted with salt and slush. She wore a thick brown parka over her professional slacks and boots, her blonde hair frizzing around her scarf from the dry heat. Grace Hartley was in her early 40s, lean and long-limbed, with a kind but no-nonsense air about her. She was the kind of woman who knew exactly how many seconds it took for a child to disappear in a crowded mall, and never stopped counting. She hugged Claire and scooped Emily into the car with practiced ease. The girl clung to her teddy bear, silent but wide-eyed. Max sat in the back seat beside her, tail thumping softly as he rested his head in her lap. Claire had asked Logan to let him accompany them. It was the only thing Emily had smiled about all day. As the SUV pulled away from the curb, Rick stepped out onto the porch, his eyes locked with Claire's through the frosted window, full of rage and promise. She didn't look away. Meanwhile, Logan stood in the line at Hennepin County Courthouse, clutching the manila folder that held every piece of documentation Grace had helped him assemble. He was dressed in his old service jacket, boots still streaked with snow, and a knit cap pulled low over his ears. The folder felt heavier than it should. The clerk, a middle-aged man with weary eyes and nicotine fingers, gave the documents a cursory glance. Petition for emergency guardianship. Got it? We'll get you a preliminary hearing scheduled. How long? Logan asked. A week, maybe 10 days, the clerk replied, not unkindly. Logan nodded, lips pressed tight. As he turned to leave, he caught a glimpse of himself in the glass doors. Rugged, tired, hair starting to gray at the temples. But this time, for the first time in years, his reflection didn't feel like a stranger. He was fighting for something now. Someone. That night at the safe house, a secure location run discreetly through the county, Claire and Emily curled together on a small bed. The room was warm but plain, decorated only with donated quilts and a fake poinsettia on the dresser. Grace sat in the corner chair, phone in hand, typing up notes from the day. Emily looked up, eyes wide. Are we staying here forever? No, sweetheart, Claire said, brushing the child's hair back. Just until it's safe. Is Max coming back? Claire smiled softly. He'll visit, I promise. Outside, the snow continued to fall, but inside, something had finally shifted. The Minneapolis family court loomed beneath a pale sky streaked with the gray of melting snow. Slush coated the curbs, and the courthouse steps glistened with ice, despite the grit scattered across them. Logan stood still at the base, hands clenched in the pockets of his wool coat. Max, his 5-year-old German shepherd with a scar across his front leg, sat beside him, ears alert, tail still. The dog's black and brown coat bristled slightly as people passed, but Max remained calm, as trained, always watching, always steady. Ready? Grace asked, stepping beside them. She wore a navy blue coat over a charcoal suit, her clipboard hugged tightly to her chest. Her blonde hair was pulled into a ponytail, strands frizzing from the static of dry winter air. Logan exhaled, as ready as I'll ever be. Inside, the waiting room buzzed with whispers, the shuffle of paperwork, and the muted click of office shoes. Claire sat in a corner, pale and small in her gray sweater and long skirt, her light brown hair pinned loosely back. There were dark circles beneath her eyes, but today her back was straight, her hands folded in her lap like someone trying to hold herself together one piece at a time. She glanced up when Logan entered. Their eyes met across the room, not with hostility, but with a fragile, silent truce. A woman in a gray pantsuit called out, "Logan Barrett?" They followed her into a modest courtroom. The judge, Eleanor Whitman, was in her 60s, with close-cut silver hair and firm features softened only slightly by her lavender scarf. Her eyes, the color of storm clouds, missed nothing. To her right sat a child advocate, Sarah Elkins, mid-40s, slender and tall, with deep-set green eyes and freckled skin, dressed in a pine green blazer. She had met privately with Emily the day before, and now held a sealed envelope containing the child's statement. Rick was not present. He had been served a no-contact order after the police filed a formal report, and Claire had enforced it strictly. His absence was both a relief and a shadow looming outside the courtroom walls. Judge Whitman adjusted her glasses and began. This is the guardianship hearing for minor Emily Barrett. Mr. Barrett, please step forward. Logan rose, cleared his throat, and began. Your Honor, I didn't know Emily existed until I found her in the snow that morning. I live alone now in a small house by the river, recovering from PTSD. I served 3 tours overseas. When I came back, I wasn't okay. I pushed people away, including Claire. But I've been getting help, therapy, routine, and my K9 partner, Max. I'm not perfect, but I'm not dangerous. I believe Emily deserves safety, consistency, and love. Max sat upright beside him as if offering silent testimony. Whitman nodded. Claire Barrett? Claire stood slowly, voice soft but firm. I didn't tell Logan about Emily because, at the time, I was scared. He was in a dark place, yelling in his sleep, shutting down during the day. I thought I was protecting my child, but I was wrong to cut him out completely. Rick was supposed to help, but he wasn't what I thought. He isolated us. He made me feel helpless. She paused. Emily is Logan's daughter. I've seen how she looks at him. I've seen how Max makes her feel safe. I'm not fighting this. Sarah Elkins opened the sealed envelope and handed it to the judge. Emily's statement, Your Honor. She asked that I read it aloud. The courtroom stilled. Sarah began, I like Mr. Logan. He gave me warm soup and didn't yell. Max is my friend. I told him secrets and he didn't tell. I don't like Rick. He made Mommy cry and he says I'm annoying. Mommy says I'm special, but Rick says I ruin things. A pause. I want to stay with Mr. Logan, but I still want to see Mommy sometimes, if she's not sad. Judge Whitman's eyes softened. She turned a page, then looked up. Rick Thornton is hereby ordered to cease all contact with Claire and Emily Barrett. Mr. Barrett, she addressed Logan directly, I hereby grant you full guardianship of Emily Barrett, effective immediately. Claire Barrett, you will retain visitation rights, and I strongly recommend you continue your current therapy. Claire swallowed, tears brimming but not falling. Logan bowed his head slightly. The gavel fell once. It was done. Outside the courtroom, the sky had turned a softer gray, and a few snowflakes drifted like feathers through the air. Max walked between Logan and Claire as they moved quietly to the parking lot. Grace approached from the curb, holding Emily's hand. The child ran forward, nearly slipping on the ice, and Max caught her with a nudge of his head. Emily hugged the dog tightly. Am I staying with you now? She asked, looking up at Logan. He knelt. If that's what you want. Emily nodded. Can Max sleep by my bed? Logan smiled. He wouldn't have it any other way. Claire watched, her arms folded tightly across her chest, half from cold, half from habit. You can visit any time, Logan said, turning to her. She looked down, voice low. Thank you. I want to do better. He nodded. We all do. As they loaded into the car, Max climbed into the back seat beside Emily, laying his head gently in her lap. Logan started the engine, the heater whirring to life. In the rearview mirror, Claire grew smaller and smaller, but not gone, just waiting to heal in her own time. The last snow of winter fell gently through the whispering trees, layering the rooftops of the quiet town outside Minneapolis like icing on a forgotten cake. Logan's small wooden cabin, nestled near the edge of a pine forest, exhaled faint smoke from its chimney. Inside, a new kind of silence reigned, not the lonely hush of regret, but the warm hush of presence. 3 months had passed since the court hearing. The living room smelled faintly of pine wood and oatmeal. Toys, mostly small wooden animals and colored blocks, were tucked into a basket beside the stone hearth. On the far wall hung a single drawing framed in a cheap plastic frame. It was lopsided, childish, and perfect. 4 stick figures holding hands beneath a sun that smiled unevenly. Logan stood at the stove, stirring a pot of chicken soup, the sleeves of his flannel shirt rolled up. His beard had grown out just enough to soften the lines of his jaw, and his gray hair looked less disheveled these days. He still had bad nights, dreams that clawed at his throat, but they no longer owned him. Max, dinner time, Emily called cheerfully. The 5-year-old girl had filled out since that day in the snow. Her cheeks now held a healthy pink, and her once brittle blonde hair bounced in soft waves just past her shoulders. She wore a red sweater, her favorite, with a bear on the front, and thick woolen socks that sagged around her small ankles. Max bounded in, his black and brown coat gleaming, the scar on his front leg still visible but less severe against the muscle and pride of his form. He was 5 years old, but carried himself like a seasoned soldier. His tail wagged with quiet discipline as he padded to the corner where 2 bowls waited, one with fresh water, one with food, placed carefully beside a smaller bowl with Emily's name etched in crayon. They ate dinner together, Max occasionally lifting his head to watch the other 2, as if he still couldn't quite believe this was real. After dinner, Logan lit a small fire in the hearth, while Emily drew pictures at the table. Snowflakes ticked softly against the window panes. Max curled beside her chair, ears twitching in drowsy contentment. There was a knock at the door. Logan opened it to reveal Claire, bundled in a long beige coat, cheeks flushed from the walk. Her light brown hair was neatly braided over one shoulder, and her posture had regained a kind of grace, fragile still, but growing. Hey, she said. Hey, Logan replied with a smile. Emily's just finishing her masterpiece. Claire stepped inside, brushing snow from her boots. The weekends were hers. The court had arranged supervised visitations at first, but those had been lifted after Claire passed every therapy milestone. She had started working part-time at the local library, finding solace in quiet rows of books and schedules she could control. The woman who once trembled under Rick's shadow now stood with tentative dignity. Emily leaped up. "Mommy, look what I made!" She held up a crumpled piece of construction paper. On it were 4 figures again, this time more detailed. Logan with his salt and pepper beard, Claire with her braid, Emily in her red sweater, and Max with enormous ears. Claire crouched and took the paper. "Is that us?" Emily nodded. "I called it home." Logan turned away and pretended to tend the fire. His hands shook, just a little. Later that night, after Claire had gone and Emily was tucked under a blanket printed with stars, Logan sat beside her with a bedtime story. She yawned halfway through the tale. "Daddy?" It still startled him, that word. "Yes? Do you think it'll always stay like this?" He brushed a lock of hair from her forehead. "I don't know, sweet pea, but I do know we'll fight for it." She smiled sleepily. "Even Max." Logan looked over. Max lifted his head and let out a soft huff, eyes gleaming. "Especially Max." Emily drifted off, her hand resting on the paw of the dog, who once led Logan away from the river's edge and into a future neither of them had dared imagine. Outside, the snow fell softer now, like a lullaby. Inside, 2 bowls sat side by side beneath the kitchen table, one marked with a paw, the other with a hand-drawn heart. And for the first time in years, Logan Barrett slept without dreaming of war. Sometimes, it's not thunder or lightning that brings a miracle. Sometimes, it's the silent paw of a dog, or the soft breath of a child whispering home for the first time. In the coldest of winters, God can send a K9 instead of an angel, and a broken man instead of a savior. This is not just a story of rescue, it's a story of redemption, of how grace finds its way through the snow into forgotten hearts and melts even the thickest ice. So, if you've ever felt like you were too far gone, too broken, or too tired to begin again, remember Logan, remember Emily, and remember Max. Because sometimes, the smallest hands lead us to the biggest miracles. If this story touched your heart, say a little prayer for every child who waits in silence, for every veteran who walks through shadows, and for every dog who still believes in their human. Leave a comment below with the word miracle if you believe God still moves in mysterious ways. Share this video with someone who needs hope today. Subscribe to our channel for more stories where love wins, even against all odds. May God bless you, and may you never walk alone again.